The shot echoed through the cul-de-sac like thunder trapped inside glass. 1 second, I was on the phone with dispatch. The next, my world folded in half. I dropped the radio and ran, through trimmed lawns, past mailboxes that all looked the same, toward the sound that split my life in two. She was there, my daughter, Lily, 14, heart patient since birth. 3 open-heart surgeries before she ever said Daddy, and now she lay bleeding on the driveway of our perfect suburban paradise. The woman standing over her wore pearls and pastel, the same pressed cardigan she wore to every HOA meeting. She held the smoking revolver like it had bitten her. She didn't know who I was. Not yet. When I cuffed her, she said through her teeth, "You people don't belong here." And I whispered back, voice shaking, "Ma'am, you just shot the sheriff's daughter." That was the moment our quiet community shattered, and the man I'd been died with her heartbeat. Before that day, I thought I understood danger. 22 years in law enforcement teaches you how fragile life is, how fast everything normal can disappear. I'd seen blood on asphalt, heard last breaths over static. But nothing prepares you for danger wearing a smile next door. I was sheriff of Pine Hollow County, Tennessee, a place that sold itself as quiet and decent. 2 stoplights, a diner that closed at 8, folks who waved with 2 fingers from the steering wheel. I loved that simplicity. So did my wife, Renee. After Lily's 3rd heart surgery, she wanted peace. No sirens, no late-night calls. "Let's find somewhere with flowers and sidewalks," she'd said, holding my hand like it was the last rope keeping her steady. So we found Maple Ridge Estates, an HOA community promising order, safety, and community standards. The lawns looked cloned, the houses beige, the smiles polite. Every driveway identical, symmetry masquerading as peace. At first, it worked. Lily loved the space. I built her a small ramp off the front porch so she could wheel her art supplies down to her favorite spot under the old maple tree. She'd paint while I sanded the railing, sunlight flickering through the leaves like an old movie reel. That ramp became our ritual. Saturday mornings, coffee steaming beside me, Lily humming to her brushstrokes. She had a weak heart, but the strongest will I'd ever seen. Then came the first letter. Taped neatly to our door, typed in 12-point Times New Roman. Violation 14B, unauthorized structure, ramp not pre-approved by HOA Architectural Committee. I read it twice, thinking it was a mistake. It wasn't. That was my first introduction to Karen Whitmore, HOA president. She arrived the next day in a golf cart that looked more like a parade float, white cushions, fake flowers, clipboard on her lap. "Sheriff," she said with a rehearsed smile, "welcome to the neighborhood." We like to keep things uniform around here. I shook her hand. Her grip was cold. Her eyes darted to the ramp. "I'll need the paint color code for approval," she said. "It's blue," I told her. "My daughter's favorite color." She hesitated, just long enough to make it personal, and replied, "Lovely shade." But we only allow neutral tones. I wanted to argue. Renee squeezed my arm before I could. "Rules are rules," she whispered. So I repainted it beige. Lily cried quietly that night watching the blue vanish under the brush. I told her it was just paint. She said, "It doesn't feel like home anymore." I should have listened. Weeks passed. Karen's notes became constant. Grass too long. Trash bins visible. Mailbox not regulation height. Every paper felt like a small intrusion, death by 1,000 paper cuts. Still, we smiled at block parties, played nice, pretended it was all harmless. Until the day I caught Karen taking photos of our yard. She said it was for records. That night, Renee asked, "Do you think she just doesn't like us?" I laughed it off, but the truth was clawing at me. Something in her tone, her precision, the way she said, "We like to keep things in order." It wasn't about rules, it was about control. And people who crave control always find a way to push. By fall, the tension was a quiet hum under everything we did. Every sound, the hum of lawn mowers, the thud of mailboxes closing, carried a weight. I started parking my cruiser in the driveway more often, not out of pride, out of instinct. A signal, a warning. But the thing about evil is, it doesn't back off when you show authority. It just hides until the moment it can strike. And Karen, she was just getting started. Karen Whitmore ran the HOA like it was her personal fiefdom, a kingdom of manicured hedges and fine print. Her weapon wasn't a gun. It was paperwork, gossip, and exhaustion. She didn't need to shout to make people obey. She'd just outlast you. At first, I tried to ignore her. I'd spent years dealing with worse, drunks, liars, addicts, people whose rage burned hot and quick. But Karen's burned cold. She'd smile while she stripped you of dignity one rule at a time. The first confrontation came on a Tuesday morning. I was heading to work when she blocked my driveway with her golf cart. That same ridiculous thing draped in fake flowers and laminated HOA notices. "Sheriff," she said, adjusting her pearl necklace. "About that ramp, it's still not in compliance." "It's been repainted beige," I said, gripping my thermos tighter. She lifted her clipboard. "Yes, but it's the wrong shade of beige. Our guidelines specify driftwood tan. Yours is clearly sandcastle cream." I stared at her, waiting for a sign this was a joke. There wasn't one. "It's a ramp for my daughter," I said flatly. "Not a garden gnome." Karen tilted her head like I'd spoken in code. "Rules are rules, Sheriff. You wouldn't want to set a bad example." That word, example, stuck with me all day. Like she'd already written a case against me. 2 days later, I found a notice taped to our door. Failure to comply will result in fines and possible legal action. Renee tore it down. "She's obsessed," she said, eyes flashing. "What's wrong with that woman?" I didn't answer. I just stared at the empty space on the door, where the tape residue looked like a bruise. At the next HOA meeting, Karen took it further. She stood before a projector, clicking through slides like a teacher scolding a class. "Homeowner 16B has multiple non-compliance issues," she said. On the screen appeared our house, zoomed photos of the ramp, the mailbox, even Lily's little bird feeders. Whispers rippled through the room. I stood up, jaw tight. "That ramp is a medical necessity. My daughter needs it." Karen didn't flinch. "Then you'll need to submit medical documentation to the board for review." The words hit me like an insult disguised as policy. "She's 14, I said. "She's had 3 heart surgeries." Karen smiled faintly. "Then you should have no trouble providing proof." Laughter, awkward and nervous, rippled from the back row. Renee gripped my hand. "Sit down," she whispered. "You'll just make it worse." I sat, but my heart pounded like a drum. After the meeting, Karen approached me in the parking lot. Her perfume, sharp and chemical, stung the night air. "Don't think your badge puts you above the bylaws," she said quietly. I met her eyes. "And don't think your bylaws put you above decency." She smiled, the kind that said checkmate, and walked away. That's when the letters started. Anonymous. Slipped into our mailbox. Typed, not handwritten. "Keep your kind of people out of Maple Ridge. Follow the rules or get out. This is a community of order." I'd been in law enforcement long enough to recognize cowardice dressed up as principal. I filed a harassment report under my own department. No fingerprints, no witnesses. Then came the vandalism. One morning, I found the ramp splattered with brown paint. Someone had dumped it across the boards, dripping like blood. Lily stood on the porch, her little heart monitor quietly beeping as she whispered, "Did the tree bleed, Daddy?" It took everything I had not to break. I spent the afternoon scrubbing the paint while Renee comforted her inside. Every scrape of the brush felt like swallowing nails. That evening, I walked to Karen's house. She opened the door before I knocked twice like she'd been waiting. "Sheriff," she said sweetly, "to what do I owe the pleasure?" "Did you vandalize my property?" "Vandalize?" She let out a small laugh. "No, no. I enforce order. Maybe the universe did." Behind her, I saw her husband, a frail, quiet man, standing in the hallway, eyes down. He didn't say a word. I leaned closer. "Stay away from my family." Karen's smile didn't waver. "Maybe your family doesn't belong here." Her words sliced cleaner than any weapon. That night, I sat on the porch until sunrise, my service pistol in my lap, the ramp gleaming faintly in the dawn light. I'd faced gang leaders, armed suspects, killers, but none of them made me feel as helpless as one suburban woman with a clipboard and a vendetta. And deep down, I knew this wasn't just about bylaws anymore. It was about control, power, fear, and whatever line she was crossing, she hadn't finished yet. Because the next time she came to my door, it wouldn't be with a notice. It would be with something that could end a life. The temperature dropped the morning everything sped up. Not outside, inside me. A different cold. I began sleeping with the house lights on. Not because I feared burglars, because I feared that quiet, that polite danger that wore pearls. I documented everything, every note, every call, every passive-aggressive, friendly reminder slid under our door. I made a binder thick enough to stop a bullet. I labeled the tabs. Violations, photos, witnesses, harassment report. I even logged the time Karen rode her golf cart past our house. 8:03 a.m., 2:10 p.m., 7:45 p.m. Like clockwork. Neighbors started choosing sides without saying it. A lawn here, a casserole there. The balance of small-town civility is fragile. It bends around whoever screams loudest. Some avoided us entirely. Some offered quiet support when they thought no one was looking. A few looked at me with eyes that asked, "Isn't he supposed to be above this?" One afternoon, a mother I'd arrested years ago for shoplifting stepped off her porch and handed me a paper cup of coffee. "Don't let them win," she said simply. Then she shuffled back inside and pulled her curtains closed. The irony of people hiding behind curtains in a community that demanded sameness was not lost on me. At 3:17 p.m. on a hot Thursday, I found a letter wrapped around one of Lily's little clay birds, the ones she painted and hung on the porch. The note was typed, "Maple Ridge is not for everyone. Remove your ramp or remove yourselves." I folded it into the binder. My hands didn't shake until later. The HOA increased its pressure, fines. A vote to file a lien for unpaid fines that would, if processed, force a sale of our home. Paperwork became a weapon forged in meeting minutes and signatures. Karen moved like a shadow through the community, always present, never seen coming. She'd show up at events with a polite smile and a clipboard of grievances ready to distribute. "It's about standards," she'd say, when cameras happened to be around. When cameras weren't, she would whisper to other board members, "We can't let precedent be set." One evening, I caught her on the sidewalk, taking a photo of Lily's easel under the tree. She held the camera steady, as if aiming at a crime scene. I walked over. "Why are you taking photos of my child's drawings?" I asked. She blinked, then smiled. "Documentation." "Documentation of what?" "Childhood?" I said, louder than I intended. She lowered the camera. "You make it personal, Sheriff." Don't let it get messy. Her husband, always quiet, stood behind her that night, hands in his pockets. He watched me the way a man might watch two animals fight at a fence, interested, unnerved, unwilling to intervene. I started installing cameras. My deputies helped, professional, discreet. Motion sensors, field of view, infrared. The house began to look like a small command center. We didn't need to hide anymore. We needed to see. 1 week later, at 10:02 a.m., motion alerts pinged my phone. The footage showed Karen approaching our property, golf cart behind her. She carried a square of plywood and tools. My stomach dropped. She parked at the curb, eyes scanning, then walked to the ramp. The video is clinical. Timestamps, pixels. In real life, it was worse. It was the sound of wood against wood, the scrape of metal. Lily's small footsteps behind me as she carried a box of paints. "Miss Whitmore," I called through the screen. She looked up, face blank. "This is private property. Move away." She set the plywood against the ramp and began sawing. I grabbed my keys and walked to the front yard, sweatshirt sleeves tugging at my wrists. The sun was hot. My skin prickled. There were neighbors standing by their mailboxes watching but pretending not to. "Sheriff," she said when I reached her, sweat dotting her upper lip, "we gave you time to comply." The board voted. "You refused. The court issued a temporary stay," I said. "This is illegal." She smiled, small and thin. Sometimes the law is slow. Sometimes order must be preserved. She reached for a crowbar. Her husband hovered close, jaw tight. He grunted something. She ignored him. For a moment, I thought it would end with threats and calls to the attorney. For a heartbeat, I imagined pulling her to the ground and taking the crowbar, citing her for trespass. Instead, I called the county clerk and then the HOA lawyer. I told them exactly what she was doing. I told them I'd be recording the interaction. She turned at the sound of my phone recording, and for one tinny second I felt triumph. Documentation would show the world the truth. The footage would make her accountable. I felt decent, human, legal. Then she did something I never saw coming. She slammed the crowbar to the ramp in a rage, more to make noise than damage, and then stepped back. Her hands went into her bag. No one reached for a weapon in my whole career as fast as she reached into that canvas purse. Not gang members. Not the man who once tried to run our cruiser off the road. When she pulled out the gun, the sun caught the metal. It flashed. Everything slows in that moment. The air thickens. Sound filters like someone turning down a dial. There's smell, oil, paint, hot metal, and then a new smell, sharp and sulfurous. Gunpowder. Lily's painting box rattled to the grass. She didn't understand. She thought they were playing. She thought it was pretend. I moved first. Muscle memory from decades of training, draw, aim, vocal commands. "Drop it," I shouted. Karen's mouth opened. "You," she began. Her finger tightened. The first shot cracked like a tree falling. It was not at me. It was at Lily. She fell forward, small and bright against the concrete, her sundress flowering with a darkening stain. The world condensed to the scream that ripped from my chest, the kind of sound that is not human but something deeper, older. I dropped my phone. It hit the gravel and skidded across the driveway, the recording still going. The camera caught the haphazard angles. My hands trembling, Karen's face collapsing into disbelief, her husband's hands flying to his mouth. She did not remember the rest in clear, orderly sentences. We do not remember grief cleanly. Memory becomes a collage of details. Lily's last breath, the heat of the pavement, the copper taste in my mouth. Karen dropped the gun as if it burned. She backed away and sat on the curb, shaking, whispering, "I didn't mean—" She moved. Around us, time fractured. Neighbors came out, drawn by the noise. Some cried, some stood frozen. A woman in a floral dress vomited and had to be led inside by a neighbor. My uniform was still on beneath my shirt. The badge at my hip felt absurdly useless. I pressed my palm to Lily's chest. It was colder than it should have been. I felt for a pulse. I counted, but nothing answered. Her little heart monitor, the kind that chirped in lullabies sometimes, screamed to life and then fell silent when the paramedics cut it away. Hands moved around me, paramedics, deputies, but none of their words reached me. I was a man outside of rules, outside of badge, outside of rank. A father reduced to a rag. When they finally secured the scene and I saw Karen's face lit by the flashing lights, I realized she didn't know me. She didn't know the name behind the badge. She was a woman who had believed rules could be enforced with force. She was a person who had just destroyed a life. I cuffed her myself, not because I had to, but because I could not let go of the idea that order required action even as order had betrayed me. She whispered as we led her away, "You people don't belong here." I wanted to tell her then. Tell her the badge I wore was the same one I'd been wearing when she called the board into session, that I had sworn to protect the very ideal she'd claimed to uphold, but my mouth only formed words into the air. "You shot my girl." The shot did more than ruin a family. It cracked open a neighborhood and let everything rot inside out. Secrets oozed. People took sides. The press arrived with birds of prey eyes. For a long time after, I replayed the footage, the clinical clarity of timestamps, because I needed proof the world couldn't deny. The grainy pixels showed what my heart could not forgive. The screen became a small, cold altar. That night, I sat in the kitchen with Lily's paint-stained socks in my hands and realized that nothing would be the same. The ramp that had stood for hope was now a crime scene. The mailbox that used to receive friendly notes now held subpoenas. And in the center of it all, a woman named Karen sobbed in a cell, telling anyone who would listen that she had been protecting the neighborhood. Protecting it from what? A painted ramp? A laughing child? A father who once swore an oath? The thing about turning points is they don't just change the path. They rearrange the map entirely. They say time heals. They lie. Time just stretches the sound of the shot until it fills every quiet moment. That first night, I couldn't leave the hospital corridor. My uniform shirt was stiff with dried blood, her blood. The doctor's voice was gentle, but the words were iron. She was gone before she hit the ground. I nodded. Lawmen are trained for finality, but nothing in the academy covers the sound a mother makes when she's told her child won't come home. Renee collapsed. I caught her halfway down. We stayed there on the tile, a pile of grief in fluorescent light. The coroner's report came next. Single gunshot wound to the chest, direct cardiac trauma. The irony was vicious. After all those surgeries to fix her heart, it was her heart that the bullet found. Karen was booked on manslaughter, unlawful discharge, reckless endangerment. She cried in the mugshot. The flash caught the same pearls she'd worn to HOA meetings. The news ran it for weeks. HOA, President shoots sheriff's daughter. It sounded like satire until it wasn't. I couldn't make myself go back to the station. I sat on the porch instead, staring at the splintered ramp under crime scene tape. Every creak of the boards sounded like her voice. Every dawn felt like a failure. Neighbors came by. Casseroles, flowers, awkward sympathy. Most couldn't look at me. Some whispered, "We're so sorry." Others asked in hushed tones, "Do you think she meant to do it?" Meant to, as if intent could resurrect a child. The DA built the case quickly. The footage, the crowbar, the threats, the letters. Still, the defense screamed accident. When I was finally called to testify, I wore my dress uniform. The courtroom smelled of paper and air conditioning. Karen sat at the defense table, hair neat, hands folded. She looked smaller, but her eyes still carried that bureaucratic certainty, the belief that order justified everything. I told the jury what happened. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The video played behind me. The moment the gun flashed, my scream echoing off brick walls. When it ended, silence filled the room. Then Karen began to cry. It was supposed to be a warning shot, she said. He was threatening me. I looked at her. Ma'am, I was 10 feet away. She was 3 feet behind me. The jurors didn't blink. That night I went home and took out my service pistol. I unloaded it, cleaned it, reloaded it, sat at the kitchen table staring at it until the first light crawled across the counter. Part of me wanted to drive to the jail, to open her cell door and end the cycle the way she had ended mine. One trigger pull. Simple. Final. But then I saw Lily's photo on the fridge, her paint-smudged fingers holding up the first heart-shaped flower she'd grown. I could almost hear her say, "Don't be mad, Dad." That stopped me. I put the gun away and drove to the church instead. Sat in the last pew and let silence do the talking. That was the first time I cried without holding back. The next weeks were a blur of hearings and headlines. The county board begged me to take time off. Reporters camped at the gate. Social media turned Lily into a symbol. #Justice for Lily. I hated it. She wasn't a hashtag. She was a kid who painted birds. Renee stopped sleeping. She wandered the house at night, touching the ramp's railings, whispering prayers. I'd hear her say, "I should have taken her away sooner." Guilt is a poison that doesn't need truth to thrive. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw both father and lawman and realized neither could save her. One morning, I drove out to the edge of town, to the ridge where Pine Hollow overlooks the valley. I stood there with her drawing pad, flipping through pages. Birds, trees, blue ramps. On the last page, she'd written in tiny letters, "Make it kind, Daddy." That became my lifeline. I went back to court the next day with purpose. Not vengeance, purpose. The defense called experts, tried to spin her fear as justification. She felt threatened by the sheriff's authority, they said. She acted out of panic. But panic doesn't load a revolver and walk onto someone else's lawn. The prosecution played the footage again, showed the pause between her words and the trigger, long enough to choose. The day before closing arguments, Karen's husband asked to speak with me. We met in the courthouse corridor. He looked hollow, a man crushed by proximity to evil he hadn't had the strength to stop. I told her to leave it alone, he said, voice shaking. She couldn't. The rules, they made her feel important. He handed me something, a photo of Lily painting under the maple tree. She mailed this to herself, he said she was keeping records. I found it in her files. I took the photo. The edges were bent, fingerprints smudged in paint. That night, I placed it on the ramp, under a candle jar, and let it burn just enough to curl the corners. Smoke rose into the cold sky like a signal. When the verdict finally came, I sat in the same seat I'd chosen every day, third row, aisle, right behind her. My hands were steady now. The foreman stood. "We find the defendant guilty on all counts." Gasps, murmurs. Karen stared ahead, lips trembling. For the first time, I believed she understood what she'd done. Not to my family, to herself. As they led her away, she turned slightly. Our eyes met. She mouthed something. "I'm sorry." Maybe she was. Maybe not. It didn't matter. The law had spoken. Justice, however, is not closure. That night, I drove home alone. The porch light flickered against the rebuilt ramp. I sat on the steps, breathing in the scent of maple leaves and rain. For the first time in months, I felt something like stillness, not peace, but the space where peace might someday live. The trial was over, but the echoes stayed. Courtrooms end with gavels, not healing. Karen went to prison, 7 years. Manslaughter, unlawful discharge, reckless endangerment. Her sentence made headlines for a week. Then the cameras left, and Maple Ridge went quiet again. Too quiet. The HOA board resigned within a month. The bylaws went into a cardboard box stacked beside the old pool shed, but the neighborhood didn't know what to do with itself. People avoided each other on walks. Lawn parties stopped. Kids whispered near the ramp like it was haunted ground. I stayed home on administrative leave. The department offered counseling, but every word sounded rehearsed. They called me sheriff, like the title still fit. I wasn't a sheriff anymore. I was a man trying to remember how to breathe in a house that still smelled like her shampoo. Renee didn't speak much. She just moved, folding, cleaning, refolding. She kept Lily's bedroom exactly the same. Every morning she'd open the curtains and say, "Morning, sweetheart." It was both ritual and denial. For months, I avoided that room. The walls were covered with Lily's sketches, tiny birds and blue hearts. One night, I stepped inside and found a drawing pinned behind the door. A house, a ramp, a sun. At the bottom, in her small handwriting, "Don't be mad, Dad. Make it better." That line stayed with me. It was the only thing strong enough to pull me back. The first time I left the house again was for a county hearing. A motion was being introduced to review reasonable accommodation laws for homeowners associations. It was supposed to be a formality, but when I walked into that chamber, uniform pressed, hat in hand, the crowd stood up. Neighbors, reporters, even a few from other counties. Some clapped, some just cried. I took the podium. The microphone crackled. "My name is Sheriff Daniel Grant," I said, "and I'm here because a law wasn't clear enough to save my daughter." Silence. Even the air felt like it was listening. I told them everything, how the HOA's bylaws had more power than empathy, how a ramp became a battleground, how bureaucracy gave prejudice a uniform. When I finished, the room stood again. The measure passed unanimously that day. It would later be known as the Lilly Law, a regulation that required all HOAs in the state to grant immediate medical accommodations without harassment or delay. A single sentence carved from a single tragedy. But justice has layers. 2 months later, Karen's husband requested to see me. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met in a small visitation room. He looked older, worn down by shame. "I wanted to apologize," he said, voice trembling. "I should have stopped her. I knew she was obsessed. I didn't think she'd—" He stopped, words breaking apart. He reached into his pocket and slid an envelope across the table. Inside was a photo. Karen and Lily. I frowned. "She took it weeks before it happened," he said. "She told me she was going to use it to show the board what disorder looked like." He paused, eyes wet. But when she printed it, she just stared at it for hours. She said, "The girl looks happy." I think maybe she envied that. I left the photo on the table. Some things aren't mine to keep. The house felt lighter that spring. Renee started volunteering at the hospital where Lily used to get her checkups. I began mentoring new deputies again, part-time at first. One of them, a rookie with shaky hands, asked, "Sheriff, how do you know when justice is really served?" I said, "When you stop needing revenge to feel human." He nodded, but I could tell he didn't understand yet. Neither did I, fully. The ramp had been repaired by then. I rebuilt it myself, plank by plank, sanding each board until the surface felt like silk. Then, one afternoon, a group of neighborhood kids came over carrying paint cans. "Can we paint it?" one of them asked. "Blue," like before Renee cried right there on the porch. We let them. When it was done, the whole thing gleamed under the sun, bright, stubborn, alive. A few weeks later, I received a package in the mail. No return address. Inside, a small wooden heart painted the same blue as the ramp. No note, just a single fingerprint. faint in white paint on the edge. I stood there for a long time, staring at it. Then I placed it on the railing and left it there, letting rain and sunlight share custody. Neighbors started calling the area Lily's Hollow. It stuck. Someone planted tulips along the sidewalk, shaped in a heart. The board voted to make it official. Maple Ridge Estates, gone. Lily's Hollow, born. The media came back one last time for a follow-up story. "Sheriff, do you feel justice was served?" one reporter asked. I thought about the courtroom, the verdict, the empty bedroom. "Justice," I said, "isn't a sentence. It's a start." They nodded like they understood, but I knew most of them would go home and forget the details because pain that isn't yours never lingers long. Still, I hoped they'd remember the color blue. That summer, I hosted a community cookout. No board, no rules, no clipboards. Just food, music, laughter. Kids painted birdhouses in shades of blue. Renee read a short piece she'd written. When hearts stop, love doesn't. It just finds quieter ways to move. I stood there, watching neighbors laugh together again, and realized the strangest truth. Sometimes justice doesn't look like punishment. Sometimes it looks like healing. That night, when everyone had gone home, I sat under the maple tree. The air was soft, filled with crickets and the faint smell of rain. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I closed my eyes and didn't hear the gunshot. I heard her humming. Morning light creeps across the porch before the town wakes. It hits the ramp first, that same soft, stubborn blue, and every time it does, it feels like she's saying hello. I sit there most mornings with a mug of coffee, my badge beside me instead of on me. I'm still sheriff by title, but not by heart. Not anymore. My heart lives on that ramp. When people ask how we've survived, I tell them the truth. We didn't. Not completely. The man I was died the moment the siren stopped wailing. What's left is someone different, slower, quieter, but still standing. Renee and I started something new, something Lily would have smiled at. A foundation, the Lily Grace Project, helping families of chronically ill kids fight for their rights. The first check we wrote paid for a ramp on a trailer home 2 counties over. The mother called crying, said, "You don't know what this means." I whispered, "I do." The world still brings reminders. A mailbox shaped like a heart. A little girl in the grocery store holding a blue balloon. Each one tugs, but not painfully anymore. Like a hand leading you somewhere gentle. I visit Karen once a year, not out of pity, not revenge, just closure. The first time I went, she didn't look up. Her hair had gone gray, her hands trembled as she folded napkins on a cafeteria tray. "You came," she said. I did. For a long while we said nothing, just the hum of fluorescent lights and the clatter of metal trays. Finally, she spoke. "I see her sometimes. In my dreams. She doesn't speak." "She doesn't have to," I said. She nodded, tears trembling. "I'm sorry." "I know." I left without shaking her hand. Forgiveness isn't something you give out loud. It's something you stop fighting inside yourself. That day, I stopped fighting. The town changed, too. Where once there were bylaws, now there are block parties. Kids paint the curbs in bright colors every spring. Hearts, flowers, birds. No one complains. The HOA never reformed. Instead, the community formed something else. The Hollow Committee. A volunteer group that plants trees, tends gardens, and checks on elderly neighbors. Their motto hangs on a wooden sign near the entrance. Kindness is the only rule. Every time I drive past it, I slow down. Not out of duty, but reverence. The ramp has weathered a little over time. The paint's chipped near the base. The boards creak. But I don't repaint it anymore. It's perfect the way it is. Imperfect, but standing. When storms roll through, I sit inside by the window, watching the rain streak down that blue slope. Each droplet catches light, turning it into something softer. One evening, I found a small heart carved into one of the boards. A child's handwriting, uneven and clumsy. I didn't recognize the initials. I didn't need to. That's the thing about grief. If you build something out of it, people will find their way to it. Last week, a young deputy joined the force. Fresh out of the academy, he'd heard the story like everyone else. He asked, "Sheriff, do you ever wish you could go back? Change what happened?" I looked at the ramp through the office window. The sunlight hit it just right, blue turning gold. "I wish I could save her," I said. "But if I did, I might not have learned what it really means to protect someone." He frowned. "What do you mean?" "To protect isn't just to stop harm," I said. "It's to build a world where harm has nowhere left to hide." He nodded, wrote it down in his notebook like it was a quote. Maybe someday he'll understand. Sometimes when the wind is just right, I swear I hear her humming under the maple tree. Not a ghost, a memory that refuses to fade. I close my eyes and listen. Her voice blends with the sound of leaves, with the pulse of a community that finally learned compassion, with the steady rhythm of a heart that doesn't beat anymore but still moves the world around it. I used to think justice came from the badge on my chest. Now I know it comes from the hearts we keep beating after they've stopped. If you've lost someone, to violence, to cruelty, to the carelessness of others, don't let it hollow you out. Let it guide you. Let it build something new. Because sometimes the only way to honor a heart that's stopped is to keep love moving in its place. And if you've listened this far, you already know. Justice isn't punishment. It's transformation. Comment below what justice means to you.